practice. Now we are entering the last part slowly of the treatise concerned with the practice. And of course, the most important practice is wisdom. And that is what the part of the text with which we are dealing, the most important part, the explanation is actually explaining. When we have the wisdom, when we have the right view, and the right view is different in different traditions. When we have the right view based on the understanding of one mind, which is the purpose of this scripture. Through understanding the one mind, we can understand the great essence, the great characteristics of the essence, and the great functions of the essence. And they always come together. They always come together, provided we understand this one mind. And this one mind here is this Tathagata Garbha, or Buddha nature. And we, ignorant beings, we don't see it directly, but we can realize it by developing the wisdom from hearing, wisdom from contemplation, and wisdom from meditation. And this understanding will then be gradual. And this tradition combines the gradual approach with the approach of sudden enlightenment, which is called the yuan, the perfect approach. The perfect approach is that we all have Buddha nature, and we, as far as Buddha nature is concerned, we are all equal with Buddhas. But we don't see it, but the Buddha sees it. Buddha sees it because he is beyond holding to any differentiation. But it does not mean he is ignorant of differentiation. He is not ignorant of differentiations because he has contemplated, as we will learn maybe today, he has contemplated in the cause practice, yin Tao. There is a yin Tao and Kuo Tao. The practice which is the cause of realization, and the practice which is based on realization. Now, the peculiarity of this treatise, and that's why it has so deeply influenced the Chinese tradition, especially the Zen, which is the most popular part of the Chinese tradition, maybe combined with the Pure Land. This tradition also combines Zen with Pure Land. And so when we combine this Yin Tao with Kuo Tao, then we can understand the advantages of the one mind and adopt our practice to one mind. This is what this treatise is leading us. And it does in such an intelligent way that it had such a tremendous influence on practically all Chinese traditions. And in a way, it has a similar function like the Uttara Tantra Shastra, which in Tibetan tradition is a must for study for most of the students of Tibetan tradition. And it has very similar ideas explaining the advantages of the understanding, the one mind of understanding the Buddha nature. and adopting the practice to this understanding. So basically, the skillful means of Mahayana is the great wisdom, translated usually as transcendental wisdom, but this is not transcendental because it is without differentiation between the world and nirvana. Hmm? So we cannot say that it is transcendental. Rather, the wisdom of the Shravakas is transcendental. Hmm? Because by going towards nirvana, we, so to say, liberate ourselves from the bondage of the form and the mind. The form and the mind, this is what we are. And because we are attached to it, so we live as the Diamond Sutra and all the Pragya Paramita Sutras, all the sutras of great wisdom teach us, we live our dream. This is, for some, it is a very wonderful dream. For some, it is a nightmare. But we all live our dream as long as we take this knowledge of differentiation as something that is the real experience. But when we read carefully this treatise from the beginning to the end, it leads us to the knowledge that this is just a dream. It's not the true knowledge. The knowledge of the form, the knowledge of the sensations, the knowledge of everything we normally experience in the world is just nothing objective. It's completely subjective, dependent on uh, our ability to use the skillful means of wisdom. So this treatise is kind of opening the eye of Dharma, opening the eye of wisdom, so that we don't see our reality, which is always personal reality. Even if we try very hard to be objective, we will always, this treatise is teaching us, we will always be subjective because our reality is our mind creation. And our mind creation is our dream, but we see it as a dream when we dissociate. We learn in this treatise, we have learned in the preceding lecture also, lectures, this karma vijnana, which is our alaya. Karma vijnana or yesh means alaya, nothing else. The alaya is the consciousness with which we work and in which we uh, find the meaning of our views, of our uh, uh, perceptions, of our differentiations. It's all our alaya consciousness. And this alaya consciousness cannot, this is what we have learned, and also always again and again leads us to this understanding. This alaya consciousness cannot be separated from the real consciousness, which we cannot grasp, which we cannot hold, which we cannot make any actually idea of it, because it is beyond language, beyond is and not is, beyond all differentiations. But uh, according to this treatise, without it, we cannot have deeper understanding of our differentiations as being just a dream. And when we understand them as a dream, it does not mean we uh, don't differentiate. This is a misunderstanding. If we don't differentiate, it's even more dream. But we do not hold to differentiations, and so, as we have learned, we are coming closer and closer to the true knowledge. Hmm? And the skillful means for this true knowledge is the, uh, the samadhi of one samskara, Ishing Sanmei. Ishing Sanmei means that when we create the differentiation, at that very moment, we are also aware of the mind which is not differentiating. This may seem to be a kind of a paradox and does not make any sense, but when we practice, it will start to make sense. And when it makes sense, then the Zen experience becomes something comprehensible. Otherwise, it's not comprehensible at all. And Zen experience means precisely this, not holding to the empty mind, not holding to the differentiating mind, not holding to any mind, because, as this treatise explains, any mind comes from suchness. No matter whether it is false mind, whether it is true mind, whether it is this mind or that mind, because in suchness there is not this and that, not not th, not p, and understanding that in reality there is not this shore and not that shore, that we are always in between, and being in between is being in this one mind where these two always meet, and these two always meet because we cannot live without differentiations, but we can uh, uh, release our, or we can lessen our grasping to differentiations. So this is a bodhisattva way. By doing that, we are useful to ourselves and we are useful to others without uh, without differentiation. Hmm? So in this situation, we can also live effectively our lives, which is from the bodhisattva point of view, life of transformation. We want to transform our vision to the Sambhogakaya, to the Paosheng. The Paosheng is uh, for uh, for experiencing the happiness. Hmm? Paosheng means the uh, resultant of the paramis, especially of wisdom parami, concentration paramis, which uh, transform our vision of the world, so that we don't hold anymore to differentiations, yet we live in differentiations. We live in differentiations, but do not hold to differentiations. This is a message of uh, what I understand. We may argue about that. This is a message of what the author wants to bring us to. So uh, we can't live without a form. We can't live without perception, which is perception of the form. We can we cannot live without sensation, which is uh, connected to the perception of the form. We cannot live without the will, which is bringing the mind to these processes, and without the differentiation, which is the result of these processes. But by bringing more and more skillful means, which is here wisdom, we are more and more uh, using these differentiations to not to hold to them. Hmm? And for that, he brings so many different examples and so many different skillful means to lead us to this skill. Hmm? While uh, while we have to act, and without acting we cannot live, and that one which acts is the alaya consciousness, is a karmic consciousness. Yet the true reality, the suchness, does not act, does not come, does not go. And when we see our acting in the background of this true reality, which does not come, does not go, which is connected, as we have learned, I think last time, with the light of wisdom, which penetrates everywhere, which is connected with the permanence, hmm? Which is connected with the uh, happiness, which is connected with a real self and which is connected with a real purity. These are, in traditional Buddhism, the four uh, uh, kinds of distortions or perversions or tientao or viparyasa, which cause us a state of ignorance. Now we are using them uh, to realize the wisdom. We're using the ignorance to realize wisdom. This is wonderful. When we have the skillful means of wisdom, and this book is this part of the book is all concerned with the skillful means of wisdom. So how wonderful we uh, purify the acting by penetrating the ignorance. You don't want to abandon ignorance. You don't want to uh, erase ignorance. You don't want to push away ignorance. You want to learn from ignorance. Hmm? So this is the non-dualistic view, which you will never find in Theravada. I was trained in Theravada. The defilements are the body. Body is are the defilements. This you will never find in a dualistic understanding. Body is defilements. And we can learn about the true body, which is not dualistic in this tradition, only by understanding defilements in ourselves and in others without differentiation. That is Mahayana. So, this understanding is extremely useful, not only for liberation, but also for living a livable life. Because when we understand something about Buddhism, when we have done some Vipassana, this body and mind is really dukkha. But dukkha, it can be very wonderful if we can learn from it. And we can only learn from it when we have the background of suchness, which does not come, does not go. And that is the Buddha. In this non-dualistic tradition, the Buddha is nothing but suchness. And when we uh, understand Buddha, then through this suchness, by the enjoyment body, Sambhoga Kaya, which uh, is the transformation of uh, mind into non-dualistic wisdom. Through the Sambhoga Kaya, we then observe how these use correctly differentiating, without which we cannot live in the world. Because this differentiating arises from this suchness, which is not differentiated. And all differentiations, they need to be understood in a non-dualistic way. They need this uh, deep intellectual and emotional background of suchness. So when we contemplate this treatise in this way, we will start to appreciate it more and more. Then I have been working a little bit with this Huese, the Samatha Vipassana in the Mahayana method or Mahayana tradition. And uh, our teacher, or teacher of many of us, Master Shenyan, he has had a deep appreciation of this treatise, of this Tashin Chirkwan, Huise. Especially, I have been associated with Hui Ming, who went many, many times to pilgrimage on the Nanyue, that, where Huis is supposed to have been living and teaching. And this is then makes this treatise and philosophy of this treatise on which it is based more comprehensible to us. So maybe sometime, if I'm still alive, I may translate this into Czech, because my English is not so good. But maybe some people in India can help me to do the translation, and some Chinese friends can also, some passages are difficult, can help me. So we can also talk about this, and I will maybe teach it in India also. But it needs this background with which we are dealing now. And Master Shenyan, he was most familiar with this treatise. Always, I think he has read it many, many, many times and contemplated it many, many, many times. And his teachings is, when you follow it, uh, very few times directly, but indirectly, it is based on this treatise. Hmm? Okay, so we have discussed some background, and if there are not any other questions, this I think may be a little useful, and we can always start with questions. This background to this treatise. Then, for those of us who have not been present, I have jotted down what we were talking about in the previous two lessons or so. Hmm? So we were talking about these two kinds of vasanas, or two kinds of uh, permeations of the mind. The first is by the own nature and its characteristic, and the second is by its functions. Hmm? So uh, we have learned in the beginning that this one mind, this Buddha nature, has three the great essence and great characteristic and great function. And these three, very important to understand, they always come together. You cannot separate them. The author is separating to put them again together and make us understand that they are actually inseparable. All these, just like in the beginning, he uh, separates in order to show that this separation is just a skillful means to make us understand, but it does not, it is not real. If we grasp to it, then we don't understand, we cannot understand. And the main point is that in the one mind, this essence, characteristics, and functions are great because they are not separated. If they are separated, they are never great. And this is what we have to realize. Then we can understand that our mind can have these three characteristics also when we understand deeply how it works. And this is the explanatory part of this treatise with which we are dealing. Now we are in the last part of it. Always leads us to this. So we have learned one can question, an author leads us to understanding through asking questions, making them like questions of a student, but actually it is his own questions. He asks how, what differences can there be if everything is suchness, and if this suchness, which is true nature of our mind, which has these great essence, characteristics, and functions or applications. So, what differences can there be if everything is suchness? Hmm? So, the answer is that the suchness is one, but the forms of ignorance, which is not understanding suchness, are many, innumerable. And we are each one of us is example how this ignorance manifests in many, many different ways. So we have our many views, our many understanding, our many perceptions, our all this is within the multiplicity of uh, ignorance. This is why I have explained that we have to learn, and this is not easy, it is a great challenge. We have to learn to see our differentiation on the background of the suchness, which is does not come and does not go, so it does not have any real differentiations. And this suchness, the author explained, is a true cause. This suchness is a true cause, but this suchness cannot be revealed with the true causes and conditions. And this is the alaya consciousness, which makes the all these different kinds, innumerable kinds of conditioning. And when we understand the cause and the different conditionings, here we become Buddhas. This is when we become the Buddhas. It does not mean we don't, we are blind to differentiations. We understand differentiations, but we don't hold to them because we have understood them as being the dream of us, ignorant beings. So the author has explained that this function of suchness, he has explained the essence and characteristic. Now the function of uh, is the based on differentiation. So the Dharma is revealed to each of us in a different way, according to our uh, ability to understand, to listen to it, and to understand it. So, very wonderful. The Dharma can arise in the form of our relatives, in the form of our enemies, in the form of Buddhas, provided we have some understanding that it arises from suchness. Otherwise, if we don't understand that it arises from suchness, then we cannot learn from our enemies, we cannot learn from our friends, we cannot learn from anything because we will hold to our views, to our perceptions, and thereby we will be always subjected to ignorance. As we have seen, ignorance is in Buddhism the perverted perception, perverted view, and perverted differentiation. These are the three kinds of ignorance which lead us to holding hmm, to that which is impermanent as permanent, that which is not bringing real happiness as being happiness, that which is not self as a self, and that which is not pure as being pure. So here we are, 12 kinds of perversions based on uh, wrong or perverted, literally perverted, Tian Tao, the perverted perception. Everything starts with perception because we have perverted perception. hmm? So we have perverted views. They are not views without perceptions. And because we have perverted views, so we have perverted differentiation. This is my enemy. This is uh, my friend. This is always my enemy. This is always my friend. And we don't see them as being just the process of change, same as our perceptions, our our views, and our differentiations are. They are just a process of change, but we don't see them as a process of change because we don't see their source being the suchness. This is the non dualistic approach. So you don't want to abandon ignorance, you want to learn from ignorance. Ignorance is a blessing. This is so wonderful and so inspiring. Ignorance is a blessing when we can learn from it. Hmm? Like, say, myself, I have been cheated, I have been kind of robbed of the property I have been gathering for trying to help others to learn Buddhism. I have been robbed of that, but in the beginning it was just mass in the mind. But now I found it is a wonderful thing that happened to me. I did not lose everything. I did not lose my wisdom, and it has uh, deepened by uh, experiencing very unpleasant things. But now, because I don't hold to this loss anymore, and I just work with the facts, so it does not affect me much. It affects me to. I am thankful that it allows me to deepen my wisdom, to deepen my understanding of cause and effect. Cause and effect is wisdom. So this suchness function in terms of differentiation. So we experience it in all different ways. We learn from enemies, friends, bodhisattvas, buddhas, but it also has the sameness because when we understand the sameness, then uh, we see that finally all the Buddhas are the same and that the real Buddhas we can only understand by understanding the uh, true nature of our mind. And the true nature of our mind reveals the Sambhoga Kaya. That is the uh, body of enjoyment, which can transform our visions of the world to see that uh, all is in one and one is in all. Hmm? That what happens to others is inseparable from what happens to us, and what happens to us is inseparable from what happens to others. So we get the vision of the great enlightenment, not personal enlightenment. So then we have learned all kinds of differentiations based on the function of the suchness, which happens in term of um, the bring a speedy realization, bring realization in long term, and again, this long term and speedy realization has the aspect of uh, increasing our ability to practice and ability to receive the great Tao, the great Dharma of non-differentiation. Then we have learned, we repeat because otherwise what we're going to learn today will not be clear. We have to have a background to it. So that is why I jotted down just in points. Then we learned there are two kinds of the permeation of mind by suchness, by the essence related to suchness, and that is when we are not yet connected, Wei Xiangyin, we are not yet connected with the true non-dualistic understanding. We only connected with a mind based on the six consciousnesses, which are responsible for our differentiation and holding to differentiation. So in this conditioning, we cannot act spontaneously, we act kind of forcefully. We have an idea which we force ourselves to realize. And so we don't understand the body of enjoyment which issues from the Dharmakaya, which is a true Buddha, and which brings us to this unity. We only base our practice on this differentiating mind, but it's still very great and it is still very helpful, because without the differentiation, correct differentiation, we cannot understand non-differentiation. So it is important to understand that this suchness has the aspect of the permeation of mind by essence and characteristic, and permeation of the mind by the function of the essence. And they are separated if we work with the differentiating consciousness, with the six consciousnesses. But when we connect directly to the non-dualistic understanding, then these are inseparable. The essence, characteristics, and function, they have never been separated. But they are separated if we rely on differentiating consciousness. So when we attain the pure mind, we will discuss it later, what means a pure mind. And of course, suchness. Suchness is never, suchness can never be polluted, because it does not does not come, does not go. And that's why it's Buddha. Buddha is a suchness. And this suchness produces, when we understanding, transformation in our mind, so that the mind will produce the real happiness. That is Sambhoga Kaya. Sambhoga means enjoyment. Enjoyment comes from wisdom. The true enjoyment comes from wisdom. The senses and the differentiating mind they can bring us only temporary happiness. But the mind understanding suchness can bring us a continuous understanding of happiness, which in the Mahayana tradition is related to the understanding of the pure land. The pure land is the true mind, is the suchness mind. And we pray to the suchness mind, we have faith to the suchness mind. So we trans uh, uh, we revolutionize our mind, we transform our mind so that it will adopt to suchness. This is the purpose of this treatise, to transform our mind to suchness by cultivating correctly wisdom. So when we cultivate correctly the wisdom, it is explained then we will also understand that this permeation of mind or vasana of mind by suchness has no beginning and no end, but the permeation of mind by ignorance can have has no beginning but can have end when we realize the by means of the body of enjoyment, Sambhogakaya, we realize the true Dharmakaya, which is the ungraspable nature, unlimited nature of our mind. So this true nature of the mind is unlimited, it is timeless, and it is symbolized by this Vairochana Buddha or Roshana 4, which stands for Sambhogakaya, which permeates everywhere and which is pure in body, which is bliss in sensation, and which is constant in mind, and which is true self in Dharma. And this true self in Dharma is actually the one mind, the Tathagata Garbha, the metrics of the Tathagata. And this metrics of the Tathagata cannot be understood by a small mind. This we will find in Sandhi Nirmochana Sutra. The small mind can only understand small objects. We need the not small mind. We need the perfect mind. We need the fulfilled mind to realize this Dharmakaya. The Dharmakaya in us, ignorant beings, is called the Tathagata Garbha, is called the metrics of Tathagata. Now, again, the question, since this essence of the mind is always same without a differentiation. So how can it have innumerable qualities? The answer is, of course, because it is non-dual. Because it is non-dual, it has only one taste, the taste of liberation. And this taste of liberation comes in this Yogacara tradition by uh, traditionally understanding the three levels of reality, which is not emphasized in our scripture, but is emphasized in all the scriptures belonging to the traditional Vaishya, traditional Chittamatrata. We can only understand the dependent origination as it is without illusion by uh, removing the pienti, by removing the parikalpita, by removing the uh, burden of holding to names, uh, sentences, syllables, concepts. When we remove this holding, then we can understand the dependent origination as it is. This is what the Buddha in all traditions has, has realized under the Bodhi tree. Only the differentiations are different, but the essence is the same. When we see the uh, dependent origination, we don't see the self. When we see the self, we don't see the dependent origination. But here, uh, in the scriptures connected with this Tathagata Garbha, with the Buddha nature, we have the not the self, but we have the supreme self, Paramatma. Parama means supreme. The supreme self is a true self. It is a true self because it has not this and that. It is beyond grasping. It is beyond differentiations. It is uh, beyond holding. No one can hold to the true self. According to Lankavatara, this idea of Tathagata Garbha is the skillful means for understanding the true nature of alaya. Alaya is inseparable from the Tathagata Garbha. The Lankavatara Sutra, which is a base for understanding Zen, they are taught to be equal because the essence and the characteristics and functions you cannot separate. This is a teaching of this treatise. This is what it is all about. So when we remove the parikalpita, the fabricated reality by names and so on, by concepts, then we can understand the true dependent origination. And the true dependent origination has no limits. So in it, as we will learn today, in it, you cannot separate the form and the mind. Form and the mind, they are unity. There is no form without the mind. There is no mind without the form. Hmm? The tradition based on differentiation takes nirvana to be something which is, so to say, uh, beyond form and mind. But here, because form and mind can never be differentiated, form and mind is suchness, and suchness is nirvana. Is nirvana realized by not holding to differentiation, by penetrating differentiation, not removing differentiation, not removing ignorance, but penetrating ignorance. So, by penetrating ignorance, that which is a true mind and that which is the dream mind which arises and passes away, the karmic mind, they uh, appear together. In a differentiating mind, we believe that they do not appear together. But in the uh, understanding that they are inseparable, the samsara and nirvana, they appear together. So, when we understand the Sambhoga Kaya, the body of enjoyment, so we will also understand when the mind moves, it does not uh, lose its blissful nature. So when we understand this mind, we automatically, this mind which does not hold to anything, we automatically uh, stop believing in the reality of these signs which are the base for our perceptions and for our uh, feelings or uh, emotions. So we can use these perceptions, we can use these emotions without holding to them. And that is the uh, that is the wonder of the non-dualistic approach to meditation. Rather than getting rid of ignorance, we use ignorance as the best means for realizing the highest, which is nirvana in all Buddhist traditions. Now, based on these philosophies and in the tantric tradition, they go much further in developing the skillful means with the idea that even the poison is the best medicine when we know how to use it. So the defilements are not good for sure, but they become good if we can learn from them, and they become the best way to learn when we know how to use them with the perspective of this poison being the best medicine. So uh, then we come to our text. So much we have been preparing to understand what follows. Now let us see. The text says, what is there is just an illusionary mind. This illusionary mind, what is there? What is there which we can hold, which we can grasp, is just an illusionary mind. Wang Xin. Wang Xin produces Wang Xiang, produces the perverted mind, produces perverted perceptions. And these perverted perceptions, we have learned, they are manifestation. Alaya has the aspect of Jie and Puchie. They are manifestation of the Puchie, of the Alaya, of the non-enlightened aspect of the Alaya. And this non-enlightened aspect of the Alaya becomes a bliss when we understand it, that it appears thought by thought, Nian, each Nian, each thought, each moment in which we hold to the uh, differentiation is the aspect of nobody, no, uh, of the aspect of Puchie. And this aspect of Puchie give rise to holding, to Nien, to thinking. Thinking is a most wonderful thing when we understand it. Same, the perceptions are the most wonderful thing when we know how to use them. Sensations are the most wonderful thing when we know how to use them. The will is the most wonderful thing when we know how to use them. The differentiation, most wonderful thing when we know how to use them. And how do we learn to use them? To understand that the thinking arises moment by moment. And when we take this object of thinking as being something real, that by that we can study moment by moment our ignorance, which is holding to differentiation, holding to Nien, holding to thinking. Hmm? Rationalistic philosophy is based on the I think, therefore I am. Here we have the opposite. The rationalistic philosophy, the deep understanding of mind comes from as soon as I start thinking and believe the thinking to be something objective, I rely not on true mind, but I rely on ignorance. The true nature of mind does not arise. When it does not arise, it can never end. And thus is the light of science, of vidya. The avidya, the nescience or ignorance, can only be removed by science, which is the opposite of nescience. And this, to this science, to it belongs the great light of wisdom. Science means the great light of wisdom. What wisdom? The pragya paramita, non-dualistic wisdom. Very wonderful thing which is developed in many passages of Pragya Paramita Sutras, if the mind gave rise to seeing, that means seeing by differentiation, seeing by taking the signs of objects as something really being there, separate from the mind, it would have the characteristic of non-seeing. Very wonderful explanation. If we see something that we see as really being there, object of some objective differentiation, then it means that we are not seeing, because here Madhyamika comes in. When something arises, it can arise either from the self, which does not make sense, from the other, does not make sense, from self and other, does not make sense, and from causes and conditions, it also does not make sense, because if it arose from causes and conditions, without causes and conditions, then it would not arise at all, because all that arises due to causes and conditions. So, Vikranta Vikrama Pragya Paramita Sutra, not well known in China, but popular in Tibet, and it is preserved in Sanskrit, says, if uh, if seeing had an object, or if knowledge had an object, it would be ignorance. This is the Pragya Paramita Sutra teaching. If knowledge had a real object, that knowledge would be ignorance. This is precisely what we learned here. Vikrama Vikranta Sutra. However, nature of mind, the nature of mind in a true sense is what the Chinese philosophy calls Li. The nature of mind is free from seeing. So, because nature of mind is free from seeing, therefore it does not clash with any object. Sure. And when the nature of mind does not clash with any object, Li and She do not clash, therefore the objects between themselves also not clash. And if we use such a mind, then it can illumine, it has a power, it has the ability to illumine the whole of Dharmadhatu. Because this mind is Dharmadhatu, therefore, and Dharmadhatu is the Buddha, Dharmadhatu is the suchness. So the suchness is the great light of wisdom. Of which wisdom? Of non-dualistic wisdom, because it removes non-science. And the science is our present world is so interesting because the science comes close to this knowledge. The science means that because the form is inseparable from the mind, the form is emptiness. This is what the present day science, especially the physics, has come to, but it does not change very much the perception of us holding so much to our differentiation and creating conflicts and wars and incredible suffering, especially mental, not so much material, through holding to these differentiations. Holding to differentiations means holding to power, holding to name, holding to gain, holding to reputation. And this is what is world about. In Buddhism, this is called the Pa Thong, the eight winds. And these eight winds rule the world because we beings grasp so much for our differentiation. And so we take ignorance as something always negative, unable to learn from ignorance. When we able to learn from ignorance, then we can understand that this form is emptiness, emptiness is form, and sensations, perceptions, the will formations, and differentiations, they also cannot arise separated from suchness. So, because we have illusionary mind producing illusionary thoughts, so we hold to our differentiations. Our differentiations become the source of our more grasping to sensuality, more grasping to views. And so we prolong our thoughts based on grasping. And this prolonging thoughts based on grasping is called prapancha, xilun. Very wonderful translation in Chinese. Xi Lun. Xi means enjoying. Lun means inner dialogue here. We enjoy the inner dialogue. So, from the point of view of wisdom, we enjoy suffering, which does not make sense. So, the author says, if the mind moves, it does not have the true knowledge, as it is not endowed with own nature. Own nature of the mind is non-differentiating. When it moves, this non-differentiating is equal to the light of wisdom, light of science. Non-differentiating does not mean that we reject differentiations. We learn from differentiations the law of causality. The law of causality is the law of differentiations. When we differentiate, we are caught and we hold to differentiations. We are caught in the 12 links of dependent origination. The 12 links of dependent origination explain the way from ignorance to suffering, and from suffering, understanding suffering by the light of wisdom, to science. Only science can remove non-science. And the science is understanding the dependent origination. Dependent origination means that all differentiations cannot arise without causes and conditions. And causes and conditions are always on the move. But the true mind is not on the move. And the causes and conditions in this system cannot arise without the true mind. Because ignorance make only sense in regard to non-ignorance. Beautiful can only make sense in regard to non-beautiful. Good can only make sense in regard to no good. And all this is just dependent origination. And dependent origination arises from that which does not depend on anything. So when the mind is moving and we understand it as being the product of karmic consciousness, which creates illusionary perception, and illusionary perception, illusionary views, illusionary differentiations, they become wisdom when we understand their causes and conditions. They did not arise by themselves. They did not arise from others. They did not arise from the self and from the other. They did not arise, in fact, as something real at all. So when we understand this, then we are not separated from the true nature of the mind, and the whole treatise is leading us to understand how not to be separated from the true nature of our mind, and therefore find the enjoyment body in oneself. This created body cannot be enjoyed by the mind itself. It can only be enjoyed by the mind as the other related to something being outside. And the mind related to something being outside is not the true mind. It is the mind of ignorance. So here the ignorance become blessing when we understand that the uh, moving mind arising from karmic mind is alaya. Alaya creates the tianfen and xiangfen, creates the observer and the scene. And when there is observer and the scene, then comes the whole complex of continuity, as we have learned. And this complex of continuity is based on sensations. So we have dependent origination starting from ignorance. Due to ignorance, we hold to sensations. When we hold to sensations, we hold to perceptions, we hold to views. And when we hold those sensations, then we create conditioning for more and more suffering. When we hold to sensations, we hold to perceptions, we hold to views, and we hold to differentiations. So, when the object arises and it is connected with the illusionary mind, illusionary thinking, then what will be the result? Then we hold to our sensation of there being something outside, because sensation means receiving the object. Hmm? Lingna. When we receive the object of something being really there, we, in this tradition, we are bound to perverted perception based on perverted sensation, perverted views, and perverted differentiation. So our mind loses its own nature. It loses its original purity, which belongs to the own nature. And the own nature of the mind in all explanations in the non-dualistic tradition is the suchness. No matter whether we explain it based on the moving mind, like Asanga, on the Alaya mind, or based on a non-moving mind, like this tradition, the tradition based on the concept of Buddha nature in all beings. It explained the same thing. And finally, even Madhyamika does not reject Alaya, it only rejects the self-existent nature of Alaya. So the true nature of mind is suchness, in no matter what non-dualistic tradition we uh, base our investigation on. So the author says, thus moving mind is not eternal, blissful, true self, and pure. But when it moves, it cannot lose this eternal, blissful, true self and pure nature. This is a paradox to understand. And this is what a student of Zen, if you have a competent teacher, without a competent teacher, we cannot really learn Zen, Chan. It is not possible. This is what the competent teacher has to teach the disciple. We all subjected to this moving mind, to our sensations, to our differentiations, to our views. But when we practice Zen, when we practice non-dualistic meditation, when we practice its Dzogchen form or Mahamudra form or whatever, we learn to understand that even when the mind moves, and it cannot in our condition, because we have not realized the full meaning of suchness, even when we become enlightened, this full meaning we only realize partially. this this true mind has, even if we realize partially, only to this true mind, it is endowed with the great essence, great characteristic, and great functions. The small mind does not have them. This is also the meaning of the Diamond Sutra. The small mind can only understand the small virtues based on differentiation. The great virtues are based on non-differentiation, which belongs to the suchness mind. So when the mind moves, if we have a good teacher, if we have a good practice, then we will slowly, slowly understand. The more we study, the more we practice, we will slowly, slowly understand that even when the mind moves, it cannot be deprived of its true nature. When we don't understand that, then we are subjected to hot afflictions, decay, and change, not sovereign master of the self. Who is the sovereign master of the self? That mind, which is a true mind, which is the suchness mind. He is the master of the self. And the master of the self is the master of the non-self. And the master of the non-self is the master of the great self, Paramatma. So, again, we come to the teachings of the Upanishads. This true self is not this, is not that, but yet it is there. And when you understand it is there, life is different. Because most of us don't understand it is there, so we cannot grasp the suchness mind, which is the only true mind. There is no other true mind. So when we don't understand the true mind from this perspective, we are always subjected to illusions and identify with these illusions. And we argue about these illusions, and we are unable to surpass these illusions. So we do not understand the true nature of the mind, and uh, all that is manifested to us are the uh, is something always missing. We never satisfy. The differentiating mind can never satisfy us, because from this perspective we are always indulged in taking thinking as something real, because we don't understand uh, where the thinking comes from. So when we hold to these differentiations, there we can produce all kinds of suffering, as many as a wonderful comparison common in Indian literature, as many as the grains of the sands of the great river Ganges. But when the mind does not hold to the movement as being something real, then it can manifest all kinds of virtuous objects, all kinds of pure land. The pure land is the land of the suchness mind, surpassing the number of the sands of Ganga. Its virtues, as the Diamond Sutra is teaching us, uh, is immeasurable, because that mind, the true mind, is indeed immeasurable. Uh, why it is immeasurable? Because it does not move, because it does not differentiate, because it never loses its stillness. Stillness is always connected with concentration. So in Indian tradition, the sage is called Muni. Muni means the one who uh, silenced his mind. It does not mean that the Muni does not talk. It does not mean that the Muni does not think. But the Muni talks and thinks in silence. So he is the Muni. He is the sage. The sage in the Sanskrit is also called Kavi. Kavi means a poet. When we silence the mind, then uh, and don't hold to the words and to the meanings, then we can create beautiful words, beautiful meanings, because we know that all these beautiful words, beautiful meanings, they are like a dream. So when the mind is still because it has understood its own nature, what will happen? It will be open to not small virtues based on differentiation and holding to differentiation as something real, as the only reality, because we have not understood any other reality where everything is interconnected. Hmm? So uh, we hold to, from this non-dualistic point of view, we hold to defilements as being something real. And defilements are the pro- produce of ignorance. So we hold to ignorance as being something real. So we strike our chest and say, I am this, I am that, I am stupid, I am this and that, because we don't understand where this movement of the mind comes from. When we don't know where the movement of the mind comes from, we are separated from the true mind. When we separate it from the true mind, we are separated from the pure land of the mind, which is the skillful means to bring us to the suchness. So today we have talked a lot, and I hope we will get some more understanding. I am learning myself from teaching this. In order to teach it, I have to think about it. And when thinking about it, it is a challenge to uh, make it a part of my experience. And this is why this book studying this book is so helpful. When we can only make it part of our experience when we contemplate on it, and when we try to make it something which is not just a theory, but which is our own experience. Then we understand bodhicitta. When we understand bodhicitta, we can work with bodhicitta, and working with bodhicitta is Mahayana. So now it's exactly 3 o'clock. So let us finish here, and please prepare some good questions. We will continue next Saturday, again the same time, European time.
Excuse me, Pastor.
Yeah,
A few friends from your region, from Europe, last time asking about how to donate